While I was in Iraq, my wife was sleeping with another man who made sure to impregnate her. You know that feeling you get right before you walk through the door after being away for a long time? That mix of excitement, relief, and just a hint of anxiety? Yeah, that was me as I stood outside my front door, duffel bag hanging off my shoulder, 2 days earlier than anyone expected me home. I wanted it to be a surprise. A grand homecoming where Lily would run into my arms like they do in the movies. I'd spin her around, kiss her, and everything would be right in the world. But life ain't a movie, and I was about to learn that the hard way. I reached for the door handle, heart thudding in my chest. Home. The word felt heavier than usual. I figured it was just the weight of war still clinging to me. I took a breath, turned the knob, and stepped inside. The smell of lavender air freshener hit me first. It was familiar but somehow off. Stronger than usual, like she'd just sprayed it to cover something up. I glanced around. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. My eyes shifted to the coat rack by the door. There it was. A dark gray men's jacket I didn't recognize. I blinked, thinking maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Must be a delivery guy's coat or something, I muttered to myself. But it was a high-end leather jacket, the kind you don't just leave lying around. My grip on my duffel bag tightened. "Lily?" I called out, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Babe, I'm home." There was a pause. Too long of a pause. "Hold on, baby, I'm coming," she finally called back from upstairs. Her voice was too high, too cheerful, like someone caught off guard. My senses went on high alert, the way they do when you hear an unusual sound in a combat zone. You learn to pay attention to silence just as much as sound. Something wasn't right. I glanced around the living room as I set down my bag. That's when I noticed it. A pair of black sneakers neatly placed by the wall. Men's size. Definitely not mine. I stood there, eyes locked on those sneakers, heart pounding a little harder than before. "Whose shoes are these?" I said aloud, loud enough for her to hear. Another pause. This one was even longer. "Oh, those are just delivery guy's shoes. He was helping me bring in some boxes earlier and forgot them," she said, her voice still too chipper, too sweet. My eyes stayed on the sneakers like they were giving me orders. "Delivery guy, huh? Since when do delivery guys take off their shoes inside the house?" I knew that lie as soon as it left her mouth, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Lily came down the stairs a minute later, dressed in a loose sweater that hung a little too perfectly over her midsection. She was smiling wide, but her eyes didn't match. I know my wife. Or at least, I thought I did. Her eyes darted everywhere but to me. I could see her scanning the room like she was checking to make sure everything was in place. Her hands fidgeted. She never fidgets. "Baby, you're home early." She ran up to hug me, wrapping her arms around me tighter than usual. "You didn't tell me you were coming back today." "That was kind of the point," I said, hugging her back but watching her face as she pressed it into my chest. "Wanted to surprise you." "Well, you sure did." She pulled back, smiling wider than necessary. "I was just about to start cleaning. House is a bit of a mess." I glanced around. The house wasn't messy. It was spotless. But you know what they say. A clean house can be just as suspicious as a messy one. I glanced at her again, and that's when my eyes shifted to her stomach. It was subtle, but now that I was looking, I could see it. A small bump, barely noticeable, but I know my wife's body like I know my rifle. That wasn't weight gain. That was something else. "Everything okay, Lil?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She tilted her head, her eyes squinting like she was confused. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" I shrugged. "You look different. Healthy, I guess. Glowing, maybe?" I tilted my head toward her belly. "Gained a little weight, huh?" Her face shifted for just a second. Panic, then a quick recovery. "Ugh, yeah," she said, rubbing her hands over her sweater like it suddenly got itchy. "I've been eating all kinds of junk while you were gone. You know how it is." She forced a laugh, but I didn't join in. I smiled anyway. A fake one. The kind I used on locals during tense negotiations overseas. "Yeah, I know how it is," I said slowly. "Stress eating, huh?" "Yup, exactly." She smiled too wide again, eyes still darting everywhere but me. That's when it hit me. All the little signs I'd been ignoring since I walked in the door. The jacket, the shoes, the over-explained answers, the way her arms lingered around me a little too long like she was holding me together so I wouldn't notice. I noticed. But I'm a soldier. I've been trained to stay calm when everything around me is falling apart. So that's what I did. I stayed calm. My heart wanted to rage, to demand answers, but my head knew better. The best ambushes happen when your target thinks they're safe. I kissed her on the cheek, lingering just long enough for her to feel safe. "Missed you, Lil," I whispered. "I missed you too, baby," she said, her eyes blinking rapidly like she was trying not to cry. She was crying for herself, not for me. "Let me go put my bag upstairs," I said casually, already planning my next move. "Okay, I'll make you something to eat," she called after me, her voice suddenly cheerful again. I nodded and climbed the stairs slowly, listening carefully as I went. I didn't hear her footsteps follow me. She stayed downstairs, probably texting. I knew because I heard the faint buzz of a phone vibrating. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. The stillness before a storm. My hand reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. My fingers hovered over the contacts, then I tapped on the name. Sergeant. Dean Parker. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, brother," he said. "Welcome home." "Yeah, thanks," I muttered, rubbing the back of my head. "Listen, Dean, I got a weird situation here." Dean's tone shifted immediately. He knows the tone of a man on alert. "Talk to me," he said, his voice sharp and steady. "There's something off with Lily," I said slowly. "Shoes at the door that ain't mine. Jacket on the coat rack too nice for a delivery guy. And she's acting..." I took a deep breath. "She's acting like I'm not supposed to be here." Dean didn't respond right away, but I could hear him thinking. "Want me to come by?" he finally asked. "No," I said, my voice firm. "Not yet." Because I knew something else now. The enemy moves differently when they think they're unseen. So I'd let Lily keep thinking I was blind. Let her think she had me fooled. But I'd seen enough during war to know how to stay quiet, stay patient, and wait for the right moment. I'd seen men hide explosives in plain sight, thinking no one would notice. This wasn't much different. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions. Military life trains you to observe first, act second. So, that's exactly what I did. I observed. I watched. And I kept quiet. But sometimes, life doesn't wait for you to piece things together. Sometimes, it just punches you right in the face. It happened on a Tuesday night. We'd just finished dinner. Nothing special, just some spaghetti she whipped up. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through TV channels, trying to act like everything was normal. Lily sat across from me, pretending to scroll on her phone, but I noticed her eyes weren't focused. You can always tell when someone's not really scrolling. Her thumb was moving, but her eyes were somewhere else. I kept glancing at her from the corner of my eye. She had that loose gray sweater on again, the same one she wore the night I got back. And it hit me. She'd been wearing baggy clothes a lot lately. Hoodies, oversized t-shirts, sweaters that didn't fit. It wasn't like her. Lily loved fitted clothes. She always joked about how I should appreciate the view while I could. But now, baggy everything, every day. I sat up straighter, my eyes narrowing as I stared at her. At first I didn't see it. But then, as she shifted to adjust how she was sitting, Her sweater pulled tight around her stomach. There it was. I blinked like maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but nah. It was still there. A small, round bump. Not big, not obvious. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. My heart stopped for a second. It was like the whole world went silent except for the thudding in my chest. I felt my hands get cold, but I stayed still, staring at that bump like it had just pointed a gun at me. My throat went dry, but I forced myself to swallow. Don't panic, Noah. Stay calm. Stay sharp. You good, Lil? I asked casually, leaning back on the couch like I didn't just spot the one thing that could turn my whole world upside down. She glanced at me, startled, like she wasn't expecting me to speak. Huh? Oh yeah, just tired. Her hand moved, right over her stomach. She caught herself a second too late, pulling her hand away quickly like the spot was on fire. But I saw it. She knew I saw it too. Her eyes flicked to mine for just a second before she went back to her phone. Long day? I asked, still keeping my voice calm, but my eyes never left her. Yeah, she said, not looking at me. Work's been crazy. I muttered, acting like I believed her. Stress eating, huh? She froze, just for a second. Not long, but long enough. She blinked a few times, put on that fake little laugh she does when she's cornered. Yeah, I guess so. You know how it is. I didn't say anything. I just nodded slowly, watching her every move. Her fingers started tapping faster on her phone, texting somebody. I couldn't see who, but I didn't need to. I already knew. She only gets that twitchy when she's talking to someone she doesn't want me to know about. Babe, I said suddenly, making her flinch. She glanced at me with wide eyes like a kid caught sneaking candy before dinner. Yeah? You sure you're okay? I tilted my head toward her. You look different. I let my eyes drop down to her stomach for half a second, just long enough for her to notice. Her hand shot up to adjust her sweater, pulling it down like she could hide what I'd already seen. Different how? Her voice was sharp, defensive. Too defensive. I don't know, I said, shrugging. Your face looks fuller. Maybe it's just me. I figured you'd be eating better while I was gone. Living the good life. She laughed, but it didn't sound real. It was forced, and I could hear it. Oh, please, Noah, you think I'm living it up while you're out there dodging bullets? Not saying that, I replied, my eyes still locked on hers. Just saying you look healthy, glowing even. Her smile faltered. She stood up so fast you'd think the couch was on fire. I'm gonna clean up the kitchen, she said, already walking away. Her hand went to her stomach again as she left the room. I stayed on the couch, staring at the space she left behind. My hands pressed together like I was praying, but I wasn't praying. I was thinking. My gut was telling me everything I didn't want to hear. And here's the thing about your gut. It's almost never wrong. I sat there for another 10 minutes, replaying everything in my head. The bump, her hand movements, the jacket, the sneakers, the lies. It wasn't adding up. You ever have that moment where you realize you've been ignoring all the signs because you didn't want them to be true? That was me. I didn't want to believe it, but once I saw that bump, it was like every red flag from the past few days started waving at me all at once. I stood up slowly, heading to the kitchen. She was at the sink, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. Her shoulders were tense. You sure you're not pregnant, Lil? I asked it just like that. No warning, no build-up. I wanted to see her reaction raw. The pot slipped from her hands and clattered into the sink. Her whole body jerked, and she spun around, eyes wide like I'd just thrown a grenade at her. What? She laughed too loudly. Pregnant? Noah, don't be ridiculous. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her like I'd watch an enemy across the battlefield. Yeah, I guess it's ridiculous, I said, tilting my head. I mean, It's not like I've been gone for 14 months or anything. Her face dropped. That was it. The slip. The tell. Her eyes darted to the side, looking anywhere but at me. She always looks away when she lies. Look, she said, straightening her back like she was about to give a speech. I've just been eating a lot, okay? Stress, missing you, all that. I've gained a few pounds. You know how it is. She folded her arms across her stomach. Another tell. She was protecting it. Yeah, I said slowly, nodding. I know how it is. I didn't press her. I didn't push. I didn't have to. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it quick as lightning, but she didn't pick it up. I did. Before she could even move, I snatched it off the counter. Noah, stop! She yelled, reaching for it, but I stepped back. I wasn't about to check her texts. No, I didn't need to. I just wanted to see one thing. The name. Dr. Cooper. That's all I needed. I didn't say anything. Didn't yell. Didn't throw the phone. I just handed it back to her slowly, my eyes never leaving hers. Clean up the kitchen, I said quietly. She stared at me, her breathing heavy. Noah, it's not. Clean upper. The kitchen. She froze for a moment, then slowly picked up the pot, her hands shaking. I watched her like a hawk the whole time. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. The truth was already out, even if she hadn't said it. That bump wasn't mine. I didn't need her to admit it. I didn't need to scream at her or demand the truth. I'd seen enough betrayal in war zones to know it when it was right in front of me. I walked upstairs, grabbed my phone, and sat on the bed. I wasn't going to fight her. Not yet, anyway. Sometimes, the best way to win a battle is to let the enemy think they're winning. So I sat there, calm, patient, and deadly quiet, waiting, because the war had only just begun. 4. Suspicion grows, rising action. The calm before the storm. You ever have that feeling that somebody's playing you, but they're so sure you won't catch on that they don't even bother to be careful? That's where I was with Lily. After I saw that bump, after I saw her name pop up next to Dr. Cooper's text, I knew what was up. But I didn't react. No yelling, no accusations, no dramatic speeches. I stayed calm. Cool, just like I was trained to do. The thing about people who lie is, once they think you believe them, they start slipping. And Lily? She was slipping bad. It started small. Little things. She'd tell me she had an appointment with Dr. Cooper for a routine checkup. She even threw in, just to be safe, like I was supposed to pat her on the back for being proactive about her health. I just nodded, gave her that clueless husband smile and said, "Yeah, babe, that makes sense." But inside, I was taking notes. Routine checkup? Twice a week? Nah. The next time she left for one of these appointments, I waited 5 minutes, got in my truck, and followed her. I stayed far back, 3 or 4 cars behind her, blending in with traffic. She didn't notice. She was too busy texting. I could see her head bobbing like she was laughing at something. Guess what? She wasn't heading to the clinic. I followed her right to a little cafe on the other side of town. Small, quiet, barely any customers. She pulled into the lot, parked, and walked inside. I didn't follow. I just sat there, parked across the street, watching. 15 minutes later, guess who shows up? Dr. Aaron Cooper. He pulled in, parked his shiny black BMW like he owned the world, and walked inside like a man who knew he was meeting someone special. No briefcase, no stethoscope, no doctor energy. Just a man who had plans for the afternoon. I watched him walk in, cool as ice, like he didn't have a care in the world. They sat together, not across from each other, like 2 people having a medical consultation. Nah, they sat side by side in one of those corner booths. I watched Lily lean in, smiling, laughing at something he said. She even put her hand on his arm. Her hand on his arm. I'm not a jealous man. But in that moment, I felt something deep in my chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was something colder, something sharper. I could feel my jaw tighten. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. But I didn't move. I didn't get out of the truck. I sat there, staring, feeling my pulse slow down, my breathing go steady. This wasn't the time to act. This was recon. When she got back that afternoon, I played it cool. She came in, kissed me on the cheek like she'd been at the doctor's office the whole time. Her face looked fresh, like she'd been laughing for hours. I watched her drop her purse by the table, humming to herself. "You okay, babe?" she asked, glancing at me as she pulled her hair into a loose bun. "Yeah, fine," I said, keeping my eyes on the TV. "You good? Doctors say everything's fine?" "Yup, clean bill of health," she said, already walking toward the kitchen. "He said I'm as healthy as ever. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood." "Healthy, huh?" "Yeah, I bet he did say that." I glanced at the purse she'd dropped. Normally, I wouldn't snoop. But now? Now everything was different. I waited until she went upstairs, then I opened her bag. Phone wasn't in there. She never leaves that behind anymore. But I did see one thing that stood out. A receipt. It was from the cafe. 2 meals, 2 drinks, paid in cash. I snapped a picture of it with my phone, then put it back exactly where I found it. Evidence. Small, but enough to start a case. For the next week, I kept watching. I didn't say anything to her. I didn't argue. I didn't confront. I followed. I recorded. I stayed patient. On Thursday, she had another doctor's appointment. Same routine. She left. 5 minutes later, I followed. This time, she didn't go to the cafe. This time, she went to a small hotel on the other side of town. She didn't even hesitate. Parked, walked right in like she'd done it 100 times. 10 minutes later, Dr. Cooper walked in too. I sat there in my truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I could feel my chest rise and fall slowly. But my head? My head was calm, ice cold. I've seen guys try to pull fast ones on me before. Locals in war zones trying to smile in your face while hiding a knife behind their back. You learn to recognize it. You learn to recognize them. But nothing hits quite like realizing the enemy's in your own house. That night, I watched her. Watched her smile like she didn't have a care in the world. Watched her dance around the kitchen while cooking dinner. She even came over, kissed me on the cheek, asked if I was okay. "Yeah," I said, looking her dead in the eyes. "Never been better." She smiled. I smiled back, but something in my eyes must have thrown her off because she tilted her head, squinting like she was trying to figure me out. "You sure?" she asked, her voice a little softer now. "You seem different." "I'm good," I said, smiling wider than before. "I'm just seeing things clearly now." I swear she flinched. Just a little. But I caught it. She set my plate down in front of me like it was nothing, but her eyes stayed on me longer than usual. She was trying to read me. I didn't give her anything to read. I sat at the table, cut my steak, and took a slow bite. "How's the baby?" I asked, voice flat, like I was asking about the weather. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her eyes darted to mine so fast she probably got whiplash. There it was, the crack, the slip. "The baby?" she asked, laughing nervously. "What baby?" I stared at her, deadpan. "The one you keep hiding under that sweater." I cut another piece of steak and popped it in my mouth, chewing slowly. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. Her hands went to her stomach before she could stop them. Her face went pale. "Noah, stop it," she said, shaking her head like I was being unreasonable. "Don't be ridiculous." "Right," I said, leaning back, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "It is ridiculous, huh? I mean, I've been gone for 14 months, and you just happened to gain weight in exactly one spot. Pretty wild coincidence. She put her fork down slowly, her eyes locked on mine. She knew. She knew I knew. Look, she started, her voice calm, but I could hear the panic in it. I didn't want to stress you out while you were away. I was waiting for the right time to tell you. I wanted to… Don't, I said, standing up so fast my chair screeched across the floor. Don't lie to me, Lil, not anymore. Her breath hitched. She stepped back like she thought I'd swing at her. I didn't move. I never moved. I leaned in close, my voice low but sharp as a knife. You think I don't know? I whispered. I know everything. Everything. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Noah, please. I stepped back and went straight into the room. I don't know what's worse. Finding out you've been lied to or realizing that the person lying to you thinks you're stupid enough to believe it. That's where I was. Trapped in my own house, surrounded by lies so thick I could taste them in the air. Every smile Lily gave me, every "I love you" she whispered at night, it all felt like static, noise, fake. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. The next day, I woke up at 5 a.m., same time I always did in Iraq. It's a habit that doesn't go away, no matter how soft the bed is back home. Lily was still asleep next to me, face peaceful like she wasn't carrying a whole bomb of betrayal in her belly. I watched her for a second, just watched. Her lips twitched in her sleep. Her breathing was slow, steady, like she had nothing to worry about. Must be nice, huh? I slipped out of bed, quiet as a shadow, and went downstairs. Pulled out my phone, opened the security camera app, and rewound it. I'd installed the cameras myself, and Lily never thought to check if I had access. She should have. At first, it was nothing but hours of empty footage. Just a quiet house doing quiet house things. Then I saw her. Lily. Coming home at 3:47 p.m. the day before. Her car pulled up in the driveway. She got out. No big deal. She walked up to the door, but she didn't come inside right away. She checked her phone. Her face changed. Not the smiley, happy Lily I married. No, this Lily looked nervous. She started typing fast, her fingers moving like she was afraid someone would see her. Then she looked up, looked right at the camera. For a second, I thought she'd spotted it. But no, she didn't see it. She just stared straight ahead, her eyes darting back and forth. Paranoia. Guilt. I'd seen that look before. Seen it on the faces of guys caught smuggling stolen goods on base. That's the thing about guilt. It's loud. Even when nobody's watching, it makes you feel like every eye in the world is on you. I fast-forwarded a bit. She finally went inside, but I wasn't done. I knew there had to be more. I kept scrolling through the footage. 8:22 p.m. Front door camera picked up movement. I tapped the play button, my heart beating slow but steady, just like I'd been trained. I saw him before I saw his face. Dr. Cooper. There he was, Mr. Clean-cut family doctor himself. He didn't ring the bell, no knock. He just walked right up, pulled out a key, and unlocked the door. A key. My jaw clenched so tight I thought I'd crack a tooth. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, watching like I was back in a briefing room reviewing mission intel. He walked in like he lived here. Not even a pause. Walked in, took off his jacket, hung it on the coat rack, the same jacket I saw on my first day home. I rewound it just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Nope, same jacket, same smug walk, same everything. I leaned back, eyes locked on the screen. My hands were still, my breathing slow, my mind sharp. That was it. That was all I needed. Later that day, Lily asked if I wanted to go see Dr. Cooper for a checkup. She smiled like she was being thoughtful, like I needed to check on my health. I played along. Yeah, good idea. Haven't had a checkup in a while." She smiled bigger, like she'd just pulled off a magic trick. She thought she was so smart. We went together, and I didn't say much on the drive over. She kept glancing at me like she was trying to read me. I kept my face blank, eyes on the road, just nodding every now and then. It's funny how quiet people mistake silence for stupidity. When we got to Dr. Cooper's office, she walked in first. I stayed behind for a second, watching how her whole energy changed. She smiled bigger, looked lighter, like she was relieved to be here. The receptionist greeted us. "Oh, hey, Mrs. Reed, you're back again." Back again? I didn't react, not even a blink. Just followed Lily inside. I'd ask about that later. Dr. Cooper walked in like he always did, with that fake, warm smile, the "I'm a family man, trust me" smile. He glanced at Lily, then at me, and for half a second, I saw it. Panic. It was quick, real quick, but I caught it. His smile tightened, and his eyes darted toward Lily just for a second. He knew. He knew I knew. "Mr. Reed," he said, shaking my hand. "Didn't know you were back from deployment. Welcome home." "Yeah," I said, gripping his hand tighter than necessary. "Thought I'd surprise my wife." His eyes flicked toward Lily again. "You know what they say," I added, still gripping his hand. "Surprises are the best way to see people's true selves." His face twitched. Just for a second. Men like him aren't used to being hunted. We sat in his office. He started asking basic questions about my health, but I wasn't answering like a normal patient. Every answer I gave was slow, deliberate. Every word was a bullet, loaded and ready to fire. "You've been seeing my wife a lot lately, huh?" I asked, my eyes locked on his. He glanced at Lily. She froze, didn't say a word. "She's been telling me how helpful you've been," I added, still staring at him. "All these checkups, twice a week, huh?" Yeah," he said, his hands folding on the desk. "Classic move. People do that when they're trying to look calm." "She's been taking good care of herself, making sure everything's in order." "That's so?" I leaned forward. "She told you about her pregnancy too?" The room went still. Not quiet. Still. You ever hear the air go still before a storm? It felt like that. Dr. Cooper glanced at Lily again, and that was it. That glance. I smiled at him. "Yeah, Doc. She told me." His lips pressed together like he just bit a lemon. He sat back in his chair, trying to put space between us. "Congratulations," he muttered, his voice tight. "Thanks," I said, leaning forward. "But I'm curious about one thing." He swallowed. Hard. "Whose name's going on the birth certificate, Doc?" "Mine or yours?" Lily gasped, covering her mouth. She whispered, "Noah, please." But her voice cracked. Guilt. I stood up, slow and steady, eyes still on him. "You see, I don't mind helping out a friend, but I ain't about to raise another man's child. You understand that, Doc?" He didn't say a word. Couldn't. His eyes dropped to the desk like a kid caught stealing. I leaned down, my face inches from his, my voice so low it barely left my mouth. "I know everything, Cooper," I said, eyes locked on his. "Every text, every visit, every lie. You've got two choices, quit the game or get buried under it." I straightened up, glanced at Lily, and walked out. Didn't yell. Didn't throw a chair. Didn't need to. I'm not the kind of man you cross twice. You can smell fear. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean you can actually smell it. It's sharp, like metal and sweat mixed together. That's the smell I woke up to 2 nights after I confronted them. Fear. I didn't move at first. Just kept my eyes closed, steady breathing, letting them think I was asleep. I could hear Lily moving around downstairs, cabinets opening, dishes clinking together. It was too early for breakfast. I cracked one eye open and glanced at the clock. 4:13 a.m. That's when I knew. Nobody cooks at 4 a.m. unless they're up to something. I sat up slowly, feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, the chill biting at my skin. I didn't bother putting on a shirt. Bare feet, bare chest, no sound. Silent as a shadow. I moved to the top of the stairs and stayed there, crouched low, watching. From this angle, I could see into the kitchen. Lily was at the stove, back to me. But she wasn't cooking. She was stirring something in a pot real slow, her head jerking to the side every few seconds like she was looking over her shoulder. Her whole body was stiff, tense, nervous. She pulled out her phone, typed something fast, then shoved it back into her pocket. Texting him, I bet. I leaned forward, eyes sharp. She picked up a small white bottle from the counter. Not a spice jar. No label on it. She unscrewed the cap and tipped it over the pot. I watched a fine powder drop into the food. My heart didn't speed up. My breathing didn't change. I stayed still, cold and quiet. Calm as a hunter. She stirred it in, slow and steady, like she was blending in sugar. I felt something inside me shift, not anger. No, this wasn't anger. Anger's wild. Anger makes you sloppy. This was colder, controlled, calculated, precise. They were trying to kill me. 5 a.m. I'm sitting at the dining table now, watching Lily set down a plate in front of me. Eggs, bacon, toast, and a side of oatmeal. "You're up early," I said, watching her hands. She gave me that fake, too sweet smile. The kind that only liars give. "Wanted to do something nice for you, babe. You've been so tense lately. Figured a good breakfast would help." I glanced at the plate. She never makes oatmeal. "Appreciate it," I said, nodding. "Smells good?" She sat down across from me, hands folded on the table, watching me too closely. Too closely. Her eyes flicked between the plate and me. "You're not eating?" I asked, picking up my fork. Her smile twitched. "Oh, I'll eat later. I'm not that hungry right now." I nodded slowly, cutting into the eggs. I made sure to chew real slow, eyes locked on hers the whole time. Her fingers tapped on the table. Fast, nervous. "You put something different in the eggs?" I asked, tilting my head like I was trying to figure it out. Her eyes widened. Huh? I swallowed and wiped my mouth with a napkin. "Yeah, tastes different. Not bad, just different." I leaned in a little. "What did you put in it, Lil?" Her hand stopped tapping. She blinked fast. "Nothing special," she said quickly. "Just a little, seasoning." "Seasoning?" I raised an eyebrow. "What kind?" She stuttered. Actually stuttered. Garlic powder, paprika." I nodded, smiling like I believed her. "Huh. Tastes off for just paprika." Her face went pale. 6 a.m. I'm outside, leaning on my truck, phone in my hand. I called Sergeant Dean Parker, a man who's seen just as much dirt as I have. "Talk to me," he said when he picked up. "You still got that friend at the forensics lab?" I asked. "Yeah, why?" "I got something I need tested," I said, glancing back at the house where Lily was still inside. "I think someone's trying to send me home in a casket." There was a pause on his end. Then his voice got real quiet. "Tell me everything." So I did. Told him about the powder, the oatmeal, the way she'd been acting. He didn't ask stupid questions. He just said, "Bring it to me." "I'll handle it." 7:45 a.m. I'm back inside. Lily's in the shower now. The oatmeal's still on the table, cold but untouched. I grab a plastic bag from the pantry, scoop a spoonful of oatmeal into it, seal it tight, and slip it into my pocket. Evidence. Everything is evidence. Later that day, I waited for the next move. Sat on the couch like nothing was wrong, TV on, eyes half closed. I could hear her moving around behind me, pacing, talking on the phone. She didn't know I could hear her. "Yeah, I did it," she whispered, her voice sharp and low. "Yes, he ate it." "No, he didn't say anything." She paused. "Aaron, stop freaking out. He's fine. If it was going to work, it would have worked by now." Aaron. Dr. Cooper. I smiled to myself, slow and cold. She hung up, footsteps moving toward the stairs. She never saw me watching. That night I cooked dinner. Steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, her favorite. "Smells good," she said as she walked in, sniffing the air like everything was normal. Nothing was normal. I set her plate down first, watching her smile like she'd won something. She didn't know she'd already lost. "You're not eating?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "I'm good," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "Had a big lunch." Her smile faltered for just a second. I sat across from her, arms folded, eyes locked on hers. Watching. Always watching. She picked up her fork, glanced at me, then at the plate. "Something wrong?" I asked, tilting my head. Her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. "No," she said quickly. "No, everything's fine." I watched her. She didn't eat, not one bite. That's when it hit me. She's afraid. Afraid of being poisoned. I smiled, leaning forward. "You worried about something, Lily?" I asked, voice soft. "You look tense." Her eyes darted around the room, fingers gripping her fork. "Why would I be worried?" She shot back, but her voice shook. I didn't answer, just sat there staring at her, letting her feel the weight of it. Because she knew. She knew I knew. And that's the thing about fear. It's contagious. Once you smell it, it spreads. She sat back in her chair, slowly placing the fork down. Her eyes met mine. We stared at each other for a long, quiet minute. No words. Just war. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with my back to the wall, phone in my hand, waiting. She didn't come downstairs. But I knew she wouldn't. Because the difference between her and me? I'm a soldier. I know how to wait. I know how to win. There's a point in every mission where you stop playing defense and start playing offense. This was that point. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Friday. Rain tapped against the windows like fingers drumming on glass. The house smelled like fresh pasta. Lily had made dinner again. Spaghetti, her special recipe. Normally, I'd appreciate the gesture, but tonight, I knew better. She called me to the table like everything was normal. "Babe, dinner's ready." Her voice was sweet, maybe a little too sweet, like a songbird trying to sing over thunder. I didn't answer right away. Sat on the couch for a minute, letting her sweat. I knew she was watching the clock, counting the seconds. Time moves slower when you're guilty. Finally, I stood up, took my time walking to the table, my footsteps slow and steady like the ticking of a clock. "Smells good," I said, pulling out a chair. My eyes swept across the table. 2 plates, 2 glasses of water, breadsticks on the side. I sat down and looked straight at her. She wouldn't look back. "Spaghetti, huh?" I asked, picking up my fork, twirling the pasta slowly. "Been a while since you made this." "Figured I'd do something nice," she said, smiling too wide. Her eyes were twitching. "Appreciate that," I replied, lifting a bite of spaghetti to my mouth. Her eyes followed it like a hawk watching prey. Then I did something she didn't expect. I put the fork down. Her smile froze. She glanced at my plate, then at me. "You're not hungry?" she asked, her voice tight. "Funny thing about hunger," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Sometimes it disappears when you realize something's off." Her smile cracked like old glass. "What do you mean?" I tilted my head, staring at her, letting the silence stretch out. "I mean," I said slowly, tapping the table with my finger. "You've been working real hard to make me feel comfortable lately. Cooking, cleaning, rubbing my back." I raised an eyebrow. I know guilt when I see it, Lily. Her eyes darted to the kitchen, probably calculating if she could make it to the back door before I did. Don't, I said softly, eyes still locked on hers. Don't even think about it. Her breath hitched, caught, trapped. A knock came at the door. Her head whipped around so fast I thought she'd break her neck. Her eyes went wide, wild, and she looked at me, her lips already trembling. She knew. Go ahead, I said, nodding toward the door. You know who it is. Her eyes flicked between me and the door. Noah, please. Knock, knock, knock. She froze, paralyzed. Open it, Lily, I said, folding my arms. Don't be rude. Her breath came in short bursts. Her fingers shook as she reached for her phone, but I was faster. I grabbed it off the table and slid it into my pocket. Try again, I said, my voice sharp as a blade. Her hands dropped to her sides. She sniffed, wiped her face, and walked to the door. Her movements were slow, like she was walking toward her own execution. The door creaked open, and there he was. Dr. Aaron Cooper, wearing that same gray jacket I'd seen on day one. He stepped inside, shaking rain off his jacket. He glanced at Lily, then looked past her and saw me sitting at the table. His smile vanished. Doc, I said, waving at him. Right on time. He blinked like he didn't understand how I was sitting there, calm as ever. He looked at Lily, his face saying, You said he'd be gone. Her face said, I don't know how he's still here. You came all this way, I said, pushing the chair back and standing up slowly. My chair scraped across the floor, loud, deliberate. Might as well stay for dinner. Look, man, Aaron said, hands up like he was calming a wild animal. This ain't what you think, okay? Is that right? I tilted my head. Then tell me, Doc, what is it? He licked his lips, his eyes flicking between me and Lily, looking for an escape route. But the only way out was the way he came in, and I was standing between him and that door. I'm just here to check on her, he said, his voice shaky now. She's been feeling sick, you know? I'm just looking out for her health. Her health, I said slowly, letting the words hang in the air. I took a step forward. Yeah, I bet you are. Aaron took a step back, bumping into Lily. She didn't catch him. She just stood there, eyes locked on the floor, silent as a stone. I nodded toward the kitchen. Go ahead, Doc. Eat with us. Lily made plenty of food. I'm good, he said quickly, shaking his head. Nah, I said, my voice like steel. Eat. He glanced at Lily. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the floor. Eat, Doc, I repeated, walking toward him slow and steady, my eyes locked on his like I had him in my crosshairs. Or I'm gonna start thinking you know something I don't. His breath hitched. He knew he was caught. I stopped just a foot away from him, close enough to see the sweat on his forehead, close enough to smell it. Fear. You know what happens to men who play with soldiers' wives, Doc? I asked softly. They disappear. Noah, please, Lily finally said, her voice cracking. It's not like that. It's not what you think. Don't, I said, pointing a finger at her. Don't insult me, Lily. Her mouth snapped shut, tears welling in her eyes. Aaron raised his hands. Look, we didn't mean for it to happen, all right? It just happened, man. Things got out of hand, but we can fix this, okay? We can fix it. Fix it, I repeated, stepping forward. He stepped back. You think you can fix this? My wife, my home, my trust. I shook my head slowly. You don't fix betrayal, Doc. You bury it. He opened his mouth, but I was done talking. I pulled out my phone and hit play. The recording started. Yeah, I did it, Lily's voice echoed through the room. Yes, he ate it. No, he didn't say anything. Her eyes went wide. Panic. Full panic. Aaron, stop freaking out. He's fine. If it was gonna work, it would have worked by now. Aaron's face went pale. All the color drained from him. I tilted my head at him, eyes cold as ice. You really thought I wouldn't hear that, huh? He shook his head, his whole body trembling now. No, man, no, Shut up, I barked, my voice sharp as a whip. You and Lily, you lost. Silence. I glanced at Lily one last time, her face soaked in tears. No pity, no mercy. You got one choice, I said, pointing at them both. Turn yourselves in, or I do it for you. Neither of them spoke. I walked to the door, rain tapping softly against the porch. I opened it, feeling the cold air hit my face. Clock's ticking, I said, looking over my shoulder. Don't make me come back. Then I walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't have to. Some men win wars with guns and bombs. I win them with patience. Patience and precision. And right now, they had no moves left to make.